Good evening, dear students and dear faculty members. It is my proud privilege today to invite our chief guest for the day, His Excellency Dr. Roger Gopal, the High Commissioner of Trinidad and Tobago to India. Now, I know I was surprised to know that some of you really know him and you're waiting for his lecture, because when I spoke to some of you students, and you gave me some additional information which I did not have with myself. So it is my really, sir, we are really honored to have your presence. Let me just share a brief introduction about your good self to the students and those who probably know you but do not know your credentials. For all of you, I would like to say that probably you could not have a better person than him on discussing the topic that he's going to discuss today, because he is not only a PhD scholar, but he's an academician of eminent reputation. Let me tell you, he is of course the High Commissioner of Trinidad and Tobago to India. He has also represented them in South Africa before this, but his passion has been teaching. And he has been in the School of Applied Science, Technology and Applied Arts. More than 2 decades, I think, Your Excellency, you have been teaching there. He has been the head of education with the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants. He has also taken a lot of lectures here in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and I was seeing in some of the places he has been invited as a distinguished speaker in the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru, which you all know is an institute of excellence. He has been the speaker in PhD chamber in India. He has been the guest speaker there, and he has been the chief guest for the Confederation of Youth Leaders, in which some of you have attended his talk and really appreciated, where he said how you can bring out convergence between India and Trinidad and Tobago. So I think, I don't think you can have a better person than him to talk about this very important subject of achieving self-actualization. I'm not going to introduce the topic to you. The topic and everything else will be covered by him. My request to all of you is that please stay tuned right till the end, and whatever doubts, question answers, queries, and any clarification that you need, please put it in the chat box in question answer session. If you really want to speak in person, then you will take permission from the host, and the host will allow you to come to the camera and speak. But I would recommend, please put your questions in question answer session in chat box. Your Excellency, I cannot express my thanks to you for taking out time on a Sunday evening. For my students, they are looking forward to your talk. I will not stand between you and them. Thank you very much once again for being here with us. And our stage is all yours, Your Excellency. And thank you very much. Please, you can start, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And this is certainly a wonderful opportunity for me to speak with the student body at your very esteemed university. I bring greetings on behalf of my government, my people, my embassy, to the vice chairman, the chairman, to all the heads of department and deans, to all faculty, to all students, and to everyone who is listening here today. It is truly my pleasure to be able to share with you some thoughts on a topic that I believe to be of critical essence to our everyday life. As academics, as diplomats, as politicians, as heads of departments or schools, it is important to know our jobs. It is important to have a sense of skill and talent as we go about life, making our contribution. But to believe that that is the totality of what we should know is in itself a fallacy. You know, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi once said, he said that every time we enter into the field of knowledge, therein lies a greater field of ignorance. Now, it is almost bad to say it like that, but it is actually true. Whenever you start studying, you realize or should realize how much you don't know in comparison to how much you do know. And one of the major areas that we sometimes misstep or ignore is the knowledge of ourselves. In fact, Socrates once said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." So the topic that I choose today, it's on self-actualization. Honestly speaking, I have heard many lectures given on self-actualization from many different perspectives. Whether it be from a theological perspective, some have looked at it from a philosophical perspective, some are from a psychological perspective. So I am not going to look at self, neither actualization from any spiritual perspective, but one based on a humanistic psychology, which is basically applicable to every single human being, regardless of nationality, philosophical persuasion, or theological preferences. So that is my topic today. For those of you who are not so aware of what it is, then please do not be discouraged. This is an opportunity where we will explore together this very fascinating aspect of our life, which is basically you. So I propose to cover what is the self, understanding the concept of self-talk, and the self-conversion process, self-talk conversion process. My first question to you is basically, why are you here? And many of you would have a different answer. If I ask 1,000 of you sitting here today, listening to this talk, why are you here? You might give me 1,000 different responses. Some of you might be here out of just sheer curiosity. Some of you might be here to just learn in terms of who you are. Some of you might be here because the university promised you an A in social sciences if you attend this particular session. I hope that is not true. But each one of you will be here for a different reason, a different purpose. The second question that I hope that we explore before we end our session today is, who are you? And some of you may answer, well, isn't that quite a silly question to ask? Am I not Roger? And the answer is, well, that is your name, but who are you? Well, am I not a student? Am I not a faculty member? Well, that is your job, but who are you? Am I not a billionaire, a movie star? Well, those are your resources, but who are you? Am I not the president of the republic? That is a rank, but who are you? And until we are able to answer that particular question, who you are, then how could you actualize yourself if you do not know what that self means? I remember many years ago, I was quite young then, and I attended a wedding. Just mind you, I was not invited to the wedding, but I thought it would be a fancy wedding. So some friends and I decided to go to this wedding. And when I went, I saw the first president of Trinidad and Tobago at the wedding. So curiosity got the better of me. I had to say hello and get a photo. So I went to him and I asked him, I said, "Sir, I am so delighted to meet you. You are such a wise man. If you had any advice for young people today, what would that advice be? What would you like to say?" And he looked at me and I could see him actually thinking it through. And his response was, "Many people go about life believing themselves to be something else without ever realizing who they are. It is almost as looking in the mirror every day with a mask on and never removing that mask to see the real self. If I am to advise you, as a young man, he said to me, discover yourself, your real self, and then you will be able to discover the real world, because the world is a projection of who you are. And I thought that was quite deep, and it resonated with me for many years later, 28 years later, actually, and it's still in my mind. Most of you may have been aware of this actor called Johnny Depp. I am not going to speak about Johnny Depp or his issues, but I'm going to make reference to a particular movie he did. And the name of the movie is The Secret Window. In that movie, there was a writer, and that writer was having visitors. And one particular visitor was a major threat to him. The visitor wanted to actually kill him, take his life. And the movie went on where this writer, this author, was constantly fighting with this stranger who's visiting him, only to realize at the end of it, the stranger was himself. He was his own enemy. Until we realize who we are, until we recognize our place in this world by understanding our very essence, the substratum of our being, we can become our best friend, or we can become our worst enemy. So let's take a look at this. What is the self? There are basically 4 perspectives that we can take. Basically, there are much more in actuality, but I will sum it up to these 4. We could take a psychological perspective, which looks at the way we think, our attitude, and our behavior towards ourselves and towards our world. Then we can zero in from a psychological perspective, which looks at a humanistic psychology. In answering the self, it says that the self is made up of thoughts. And how we interpret ourselves and interpret that world will then create our relationship with that world. Then we could look at it from Western theological perspectives, which is basically, let's say, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, etc., or from an Eastern philosophical perspective, which would be like Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., etc. So you have all these different and varying ideas and ideologies about the self. As I said, today, I am not going into the philosophies of the various selves, but I am going to focus my attention on a humanistic psychological perspective in terms of what is the self. So let's take a look at the self. We have the sense of self-worth. And what exactly is self-worth? Many of us have issues in our lives, good issues, bad issues, and we react to those issues. Where does that reaction come from? And based on the research of humanistic psychology by Carl Jung and others, they argue that our sense of self, how we feel about ourselves, how we look at ourselves, usually stem from the experiences we had in our early lives. A research was done on a young man who now at the age of close to 20 years old, or in his very early 20s, suffered with very low self-esteem, great fear of the world. He always felt threatened in his job. His relationships were not working out as he wanted because of those same issues mentioned. And in doing a deep analysis of this individual, it was recognized that his interpretation of himself was severely damaged because when he was a little child, his father left home. So he now suffered from a sense of abandonment. His mother was very abusive towards him. So he suffered from a self of very little self-worth. And he suffered extreme poverty. So he looked at himself as being lower than everyone in society. It all came, in his case, from that sense of experience that he had as a child. With others, it need not be a childhood experience. It might actually stem from experiences that we had as teenagers, or even early adult, or even sometimes in the workplace or in relationships. And that sense of self-worth could be enhanced, harnessed, grow, developed, or it could devolve, disintegrate, degenerate. And it is important for us to understand that aspect of the self, that sense of self-worth. How do I view me? How do I see me? And how do I interpret myself? Am I a victim of circumstance? Do I see myself as a victim, or do I see myself as a conqueror, an achiever? How do I interpret me? The third aspect of the self under humanistic psychology, Carl Rogers spoke in depth, a humanistic psychologist, spoke in depth about the ideal self. Now, the ideal self is basically how I wish to be, how I wish I can see myself. I wish to see myself successful. I wish to see myself prosperous. But more importantly, I wish to see myself happy. I wish to see myself at peace. I wish to see myself at a point where I don't carry the burdens of the world anymore. That is the ideal self. Now, the self-worth and the ideal self may not necessarily be the same, because one is what we actually experienced, and the other one is our potential. The self-image actually takes place in our today's life. It is how we view ourselves and our relationship with the world. How do I see me now? Do I see myself now as an underachiever in life? Do I see myself now as being not good enough for that job? I remember a friend of mine wanted to write a book a few years ago. This would have been about 10 years ago. But he grew up in a very troubled family. And he was told from small that he would never produce anything good in life. And he wanted to write his story. At age almost 30, the ideal self told him that he can be an author. He can write this. But because his self-worth said he would never reach anywhere in life and never produce anything good, he discounted himself. His self-image, in terms of what he saw himself at the present moment, was that he will never be anything worthy in life. He's weak, he's stupid, he's foolish, He's angry. The world is against him. There's no one that he can trust. That was his self-image. How did we deal with that issue? We looked at this concept called incongruence, which means you have the self-image. So the self-image is that I am unhappy. Life is an unhappy thing. I suffer with a lot of problems in my life and there are no solutions. I am sad and I am depressed. I am despondent and I live in despair. That is the self-image. I want to have a degree, but I am not smart enough. I want to be an accountant, a doctor, a nurse, a medical professional, but I don't believe I have what it takes. So we have this self-image and we have the ideal self not being able to find harmony with each other. And the more you see those circles apart, the less ability you have in terms of reaching that point of self-actualization. Now, the question is, what is self-actualization? So we are not talking about any mystical concept today. We are not looking at it from an esoteric perspective. There's no need for you to drop school, go up to the top of the Himalayas, study Vedanta, go into deep meditation in order to understand this concept today. It is simply actualization is the point where you feel you have reached what your ideal self is. That ideal self might be peace. That ideal self might be more self-love, gentleness with yourself, the ability to respond in a healthy manner to the world, to achieve your dreams and your visions and your goals in life. That is the ideal self. If your self-image is now conflicting with that ideal self, then you are far from realizing that self-actualization. Self-actualization takes place when you see that merger happening between that self-image and that ideal self. The question you should be asking yourself at this point in time is that if the self-image is one such as discouragement, despondency, impatience, self-doubt, self-hate, but the ideal self is success, happiness, joy, perseverance. If those two are conflicting and contradicting, how then do we get this merger taking place? And that is what I am offering today. You see, when we look at ourselves, look at our very nature, you would realize that every single thing that we do is geared towards bringing some form of dissatisfaction and some form of satisfaction, sorry. If you don't believe me, think about it. If you are hurt, your thought would be to bring some kind of relief, emotional hurt, physical hurt. If you are grieving, you long for something that will bring you that satisfaction. If you are missing home or missing a friend, just a phone call will bring you happiness, or a text message. By nature, the ideal self is just that, to want success, to want happiness. But the self-image, if it is not so aligned, will work against us. So we do not adjust this ideal self. In fact, we must expand on that. We must broaden our vision, our dreams, believe that we can, believe that it is possible. But it is the self-image that requires an intervention for us to reach and to achieve that point of that self-actualization, which is the measure of the self-image and the ideal self. How do we do it? Think about it this way. You think the way you believe, and you feel the way you think. So I will say that again. What you believe, your basic understanding of yourself, is the source of the way that you think. In other words, so I'll go slowly here. Based upon your subconscious mind, what lays in that subconscious mind, what you keep feeding yourself all the time. I'm not talking about thought. I'm talking about transcendent thought, that which exists when thought is not even in activity state. How do you even conceptualize yourself? Am I a person that is corrupt from the core? Am I a person that is degenerated? Or am I a person that I see myself to be divine, to be blissful, to be joyful? How do I harness this is by the way that I think. The reason thinking and believing is not the same thing is because you think almost 50 to 60,000 thoughts per day. But not every thought that comes to you, you will actually believe. Your belief is based upon your intellect, which in Vedanta philosophy we call your buddhi, your ability to discriminate one from the next. So someone might look at you and say, you are so beautiful, but then you go to the mirror and say, I am so ugly. Because you believe that to be so. So there's a difference between your thinking and your discriminatory ability. So as you discriminate in your mind, as you differentiate in your mind, you start channeling a particular way of thought. If you go to yourself every day and tell yourself, yes, I will achieve. Yes, I am good enough. Yes, I am worthy of having success. I am worthy of having love. The way that you think will now start influencing the way that you feel. Someone asked me just this morning, I had a meeting with the Sadhguru. So I was with him for a bit. And someone asked me the question, how do you deal with persons criticizing you? And I looked at them and I said, well, can we change the way that they think? Well, not really. I can't give them reasons not to, hoping that they will not to, but I cannot convince anyone of thought. That is a person's right to think. But what I do have control over is how I choose to respond. And when I choose my response, then it is based upon my discriminatory factor or my differentiating factor to channel my thought in a healthy way, and then my feeling will follow that pattern. Because you can tell yourself a lie and believe that lie to be true. If you go about life, which I have known, people who have sabotaged their jobs, sabotaged themselves because they have kept telling themselves, I am not good for this. I am not going to apply for this position. I am not going to sign up for this degree. I am going to drop out of school because I failed 2 exams. And they keep telling themselves that untruth and believe that untruth to be true, and then feel a certain emotion based on that pattern of thinking, and then act on that feeling. how do we change this? There is a field of psychology now that we call self-talk therapy. And in this field of psychology, self-talk is actually looking at what you tell yourself. Is it based on fact? And how you're changing that self-talk into one that is more healthy. So I will call it negative self-talk, which is a very unhealthy, versus the truth, versus the positive or healthy self-talk. So it's a process, in other words. So I was dealing with a particular issue not too long ago, and this was the case. This young man said, I caused my parents to be violent towards me. He believed that when he was small, he did enough wrong to be abused. Very unhealthy. The truth is, you are not to be blamed for your parents' act of violence and child abuse. Because for almost 20 plus years, this young man took the blame for his parents' acts of violence towards him. And that is how he interpreted life. We had to take him through the process of saying that your parents' acts of violence is not your fault. And you cannot blame yourself for their reaction. But you can take control by forgiving your parents and choosing to free yourself from the burden of the past by forgiving yourself as well as those who hurt you. So what this conversion process is a transformation from the negative self-talk to the positive self-talk by establishing what the truth is. I'll give you another example. This young girl, many bad relationships, many bad relationships. And in those relationships, her partner would usually tell her things like, you're so dumb, you're so stupid, you cannot get anything right. She believed it. And she started telling herself the same thing when she made mistakes. I am so dumb. Why don't I get anything right at all in my life? In working with this young lady, we had to then get her to realize that you are not dumb. And making mistakes is a natural process in life. Everyone makes mistakes. But making a mistake is not necessarily a reflection of your character or your value. So she then learned how to tell herself that I appreciate me, I love me, and I have the potential to do anything that I want. And even if I make a mistake, it doesn't define who I am. It just simply means that I learned how to do it better the next time around. That conversion from negative or unhealthy to positive and healthy based on the truth. And these, by the way, are real examples. These are not made up stories. This person here is actually someone who's almost 50 years old, vice president of a large corporation, and made this statement: my life will be a series of failures. And I'll be honest with you, it caught me by surprise. I did not expect this. Not a person who's driving, well, not even driving, as a driver of one of the most executive class car, who's thinking that his life is a failure. Why? He went about believing that all the so-called good things in life were actually just circumstances that happened. but saw himself still not able to achieve anything of worth or greatness, because he constantly interpreted his life as failing. We worked with this individual for quite some years, almost, I think it's about 4 years, if I remember, to convince him, to convince himself that he has the power of decision and that mistakes are normal, but to recognize his achievements, to appreciate the things that he is able to do, and not perpetually dwell on the things that he did not do. He had to remember to count his blessings, to wake up each day and say, I am thankful for the things that I have done. And although there are things that I have not done, it is okay, because life is not yet finished. This person was in an abusive marriage. And she said that life is filled with depression and anger. And is anger wrong? Is depression wrong? And she was then told, no. Life is filled with emotions. Anger is an emotion. Depression is the outcome of an emotion. And it is okay to feel angry. It is okay sometimes to feel depressed. It is not okay to be controlled and react negatively when we feel this. But to understand what we feel and to choose our responses, to choose how we will then interpret our reaction to the world. This is a process of self-talk conversion. It is an identification of that unhealthy self-talk that we give ourselves each day. I will not make it in life. I am not good enough. But the truth is, you are. Your very nature is filled with potential, filled with possibilities. A friend of mine once told me, if you look at the cremation site or the graveyard, it is the most expensive and wealthiest places on the planet, for therein lies all the dreams, all the visions that were never realized, innovations that never came forth, ideas that the world never heard about, because people were not willing to put it forward for some reason or the next. We have to replace that negative, unhealthy self-talk with the truth. And in so doing, believe in ourselves, believe that we can. But it is not something that happens overnight. It is a process that takes place day after day, to audit, to be aware of the way we think, monitor our awareness of ourselves. And if you find more negativity than positivity, then you realize that you need to change that self-talk. This is not egoism. It is not about expanding that egoistic feeling. It is not. This is about a healthy sense of the self in a very humble way, to realize your full potential, to realize the greatness that lies within you. That is what self-talk therapy is. So I would end by just sharing some quick thoughts on some issues that we have dealt with over the past few years. These are the most popular negative self-talk that I've come across so far. So I documented them. I am a failure versus every moment is an opportunity to grow. No one loves me versus I love and appreciate myself. I am useless. And you will not believe how much times I've heard this. But no, you're not. I have a contribution to make. I am lonely. And I hear this a lot with young people and with old people. But you are not alone if you learn to love and appreciate yourself. I am unhappy. Well, no, you choose your emotion, and happiness is a choice. I am stupid. You cannot be, because you are born here with unique talents. So on that note, I say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with you. And I now leave it open to you to ask me any questions that you like.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I just got a message from the Dean of the university. He said this is one of the lectures which the students would love to attend and love to hear to. So I think this is coming from the Dean of the university, so I think I give it as a compliment. Now, some students are not writing questions in the question box. They have sent on my WhatsApp with a request that please do not disclose our names. So I don't know what to do, but there's one question in the question box. That is for who is a self-actualized person?
Who is a self-actualized person? There are many answers to that particular question. If you look at it from the perspective of Vedantic literature or Vedic philosophy, a self-actualized person will be that person who have learned what the not self is. The not self is the flesh. The not self is the mind. The not self is the intellect. When you remove that, what exists is what we call Sat Chit Ananda, which is existence, consciousness, bliss. The person who is able to transcend the not self and tap into that realm of only Sat Chit Ananda is self-realized. And that is from a Vedic philosophical perspective. From a humanistic psychological perspective, the self-realized person is a person who is able to blend that self-image, what I think of myself and the world, with that ideal self, which is that vision of me that I have created, that which is the fullness of my potential. So to answer that question depends upon which perspective you take. And today I have shared on humanistic psychology rather than Vedic philosophy.
There are more questions that have come to the question box, but before that, there is a very important question. A person does not want his identity to be revealed. He says that I have lack of confidence. I always procrastinate, although I know it is bad. And every time before examination, I go under stress.
Yes.
So he said, what should I do to overcome all this?
Well, the first thing that you would need to ask yourself is what is the source of that low self-confidence? Where does it stem from? And also, what is that self-dialogue like? What are you telling yourself each time? Is it low self-confidence because of monetary reasons? Is it low self-confidence in terms of how you look physically? Is it low self-confidence in terms of your social skills? Is it low self-confidence in terms of your ability to maintain relationships? Is it low self-confidence in terms of your intelligence? So what aspect of low self-confidence and that self-dialogue that is taking place, what are you telling yourself all the time? Secondly, in terms of procrastination, you procrastinate for what reason? Again, what is the information you're feeding yourself that is causing procrastination? Is it the fear of failure? Is it due to the unwillingness to get it done? So you have grown into the habit of not doing. Is it because you are too busy with something else that you are distracted from doing what you're supposed to do? Then it is an issue of discipline. So there are many aspects to answering that particular question. And in terms of stress, if you worry or you are anxious or fall into anxiety because of what you are interpreting, how is it helping? I'll give one quick example. If you throw water on a rock, it will fall at the side, just wet the top of the rock and fall at the side. It will not penetrate. But if you throw water on a sponge, it goes deep into the sponge. When the mind is at stress, anxious, or worrisome, then you will not perform at your maximum. But if you keep your mind calm by through deep breathing exercises, through physical exercises, by your self-talk, then you are able to perform better in exam and in everything else.
Very well put, Your Excellency. Very well put. I think the student would have, will now look at himself and ask these questions and try to improve. I think that would have answered his question. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Kabir, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, Mr. Kabir. You have raised your hand, Mr. Kabir. Yeah, Mr. Kabir, you can ask your question. We allow you to come inside and ask the question. Mr. Kabir, you can unmute. All right, till the time he unmutes, there are a lot of other questions. I'm sorry, Your Excellency, your question number is increasing.
No problem.
Sir, how does the student deal with repeated failure and how do they find the motivation to start all over again from the beginning?
Actually, when I saw that particular question, there are two things that came to mind. What are you doing that is causing the repeated failure? Is it something that you want to do, or is it something that someone else wants you to do? If you look at Howard Gardner, a psychologist from Princeton University, his work on multiple intelligences will tell you that we are not all wired the same. We are very different in our competencies. So some of us are more mathematically inclined. Some of us have more linguistic skills or verbal skills, spatial skills, meaning eyes, kinesthetic skills in terms of what we could do with our hands. So say, for instance, a child decides that they are going to do law, but their talent is really in terms of something vastly different. And they are going through this law because my daddy said so. And they despise it. They don't have natural inclinations towards it. It will result in a lot of failures naturally because they are pushing themselves into a field where the passion and a certain skill set is not natural to their own development. So that may cause it. And finding the motivation is quite difficult in that case, especially if you're doing something that is not in tune to your own passion. But if it is something that you are passionate about, you want to do this, and you are finding yourself failing, then you need to revise your technique in how you are going about doing this. In high school, I was a massive failure, massive failure in every single subject. And all my teachers thought that I would come out nothing in life. In fact, I actually believed that too. I was prepared to work in a supermarket, packing the shelves. I'd reached that point. And I actually did for a while. And then I realized I had to revise the way I was learning, not the way they were teaching. I had to look at the way I was going about my learning process in a way that will work for me, the techniques that would work for me. So if you're constantly failing, it is telling you you need to review the techniques that you use in studying.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think that was, I think that would have answered Ayush Rana's question. Yeah, Shantanu, you want to ask something? You please feel free to ask. Shantanu, you have been allowed to enter and ask. Please ask, Shantanu.
So my question is that accepting the truth of the moment is one of the hardest thing, and like acting towards it in a calm way is one of another hardest thing regarding the situation. So how to do that? How to stay calm in a particular situation and accept the things as they are? How to
Yes.
do that?
I was in traffic with another ambassador recently, and we were being late for a meeting. And he was, Delhi traffic is bad. So he was ranting and raving and ranting and raving. And then he looked at me and he said, "How do you remain so cool about this?" And I said, "I look at what I have control over and what I have no control over. I have no control over the traffic. I have no control over the traffic light. And I have no control right now, the fact that we are being late. But I do have control over how I choose to respond. I have control over my emotion." So that's the first step. Identify what you can control, what you cannot control. And the one thing you can control is you. How do you maintain that? How do you maintain that in a calm? Go deep within yourself. Learn to be able to sit. Remove thought. Remove feelings. And go into that realm where your mind is settled. And practice that settlement more and more, where you become that uninvolved, that keen observer in this world of drama. I'll give you a quick example. All of us like movies. I love the movies. I heard my good ambassador friend is at the movies tonight. So I love movies. What is the color of the movie screen? White. When the movie starts, you see water, you see fire, you see guns, you see fights, every car crashes, and then the movie is over. What is the color of the screen? White. The screen remains untouched despite all that was projected onto it. That is how you become. You are like that screen, and the world of transactions take place around you all the time, but you remain this observer. Actionless action, I call it. But it takes practice, and I hope I can meet you and share some of those techniques. It's impossible for me to say it in 2 minutes.
I think the example of screen.
Sure, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Shantanu, the example of the screen, no matter what is projected, good or bad on the screen, but the screen preserves its original character irrespective of everything that is projected. So if you can achieve that, I think that will be answered your question. And Mr. Kabir, are you ready? And Mr. Kabir is having technical issues. There are some more questions. Most persons say they are lonely. They also say they are not happy and sad, and they don't know what will make them happy. Are there ways to change this mindset?
Do you know that you can be in a crowd of 10,000 people and still be lonely? And you can be alone in the mountain and not be lonely. Loneliness is, to a large extent, how we feel about ourselves. Sometimes we may think that we are misinterpreted. We may think that we are misfit. We think that we don't belong. And that causes us to be lonely. With company, or even when we are alone. It has everything to do with how you feel about you. That sadness, that inability to not be happy is in actuality just a symptom of a deeper cause. Where does the sadness come from? Where did it stem from? Was it in terms of your childhood experiences? Was it in terms of something bad that happened in your teenage years or in your not too distant past? It would have come from somewhere. And the only way that you can find that happiness and remove that sadness is by first identifying what the cause is. Sometimes it might be the need to forgive others, and you're not forgiving them for their sake, you're forgiving them for your sake, to release yourself. Sometimes it might be just forgiving you, forgiving yourself for something that you have done in the past. And to change this mindset is not an overnight change. It takes a lot of practice. But I can tell you to begin by self-appreciation. Being able to wake up every day and say, you know, I'm thankful for today and I expect good things in my day. I'm thankful for me and for the things that I have achieved in my life. That heart of gratitude will take you a long way in learning to be happy. I tell my sons, my two sons, all the time, simplicity and contentment are the parents of happiness. Let us not get caught up in this world of trying to fit into the social demands and pressures. Let us not get caught up in the world of materialism, that if we don't have this or we don't have that, we are unhappy. But let us find joy that even if the rain falls and one drop of water touches my mouth, even in that I will be happy.
Thank you very much. We'll have one more question. That is, sir, what are the challenges in achieving self-actualization?
The challenges in achieving self-actualization is that most of us do not even understand the self. So we talk about self-actualization, we talk about self-realization, but then we have no idea, who am I? You ask someone, who are you? Well, I am Roger Gopal. No, that's not who you are, as I said at the beginning. So let us talk about the 4 R's of reaching self-actualization. You are not resource. You are not rank. You are not religion. And you are definitely not some idea of, let's call it, so we have rank, resource, religion, and let's say function, so not an R, in life, in society, roles, that was the word I was looking for. So we are not the roles only that we play. We are much more than that. And if we don't understand that self, what we are, then there's no way to realize it. And that's a challenge. First, understand the self.
I think we'll take one last question.
Sure, by all means.
Sir, if we change our goal, are we losers? Like initially we want to become something and then we get interested in a different profession and change our goal. So are we failures and losers?
Absolutely not. In fact, if you look at the evolution of humankind, there was a point in time when the goal would have been to capture an animal out in the field, slaughter them, and then roast them over a fire. But as we evolve, our goals in life will shift, and it must. And because of that evolution that is still taking place in our mind, in our emotions, in our maturity, our goals will naturally shift to suit. If your goal at age 10 is the same goal you have at age 20, then something is fundamentally wrong. And if the same goal that you have at age 20 is the same goal you have at age 50, then something is amiss. Naturally in life, you must have new goals and shift your goals or change your goals. I actually thought that I would be an accountant. And I was a good accountant for many years. And then I got bitten by the bug of academia. And then I became an academic. And I love it up till now. Last week, I had a new paper published, peer-reviewed journal, just last week. I had a book published in December gone by Oxford University Press. But if you tell me to go back into teaching in a classroom, well, my goal now have shifted because I love being a diplomat. I love being an ambassador, and I'm doing my job now. But I am sure, I told my wife, by the next 10 years, my goal might shift again and I might become a monk in the Himalayas. So I don't know. But yes, please challenge yourself, keep challenging yourself and putting new things forward and keep striving towards it.
Excellency, actually, I think the questions are never ending. They keep appearing.
I don't mind if you have the time. I have the time. I am more than happy.
Okay, we will take this last question.
Sure.
From Sneha Tripathi. Are self-actualization and self-realization both the same?
Well, it's a matter of semantics. So it is used interchangeably in the field of management. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where he talked about starting from the physiological, he ended with self-actualization, which is also called self-realization. So it's not really a major debate or concept in terms of the wording. What is most importantly is for you, the individual, to understand how you can transcend what is not the self and realize or experience the self. And I'll say this while I end. Remember, this experience is not something that you can define in black and white. It is something that is innate in your heart, in your soul, in your core being. As to what you want, where you wish to be in life, how you see yourself, and you pursue that. And whether you call it, I have realized myself, I've actualized myself, but you reach that point of your reality, your awareness, and your bliss. Whether we call it Sat Chit Ananda, whether we call it love, joy, peace, patience, and perseverance, but you have reached that point of contentment, of satisfaction.
Your Excellency, I think we couldn't have got anybody better than you to explain this so-called looking complicated subject, but you made it so simple.
Thank you.
That that invited so many questions, and I've still got some questions on my WhatsApp, which I will probably send you on WhatsApp.
No
to get
problem.
your responses, and it really shows the type of interest this has generated. And amongst the medical students, who are more technically oriented, who generally are never looking at themselves.
Yes.
They're only looking at others. They are governed by outside factors, like you brought out, that you are being governed more externally than internally.
Yes.
So I think they will get some time to do some introspection now after this talk. Try to identify what is their actual self and what they want to be in future and what is their ideal self. And I'm sure once they're able to put both of them into congruence, probably they will self-actualize much earlier in age than others. So Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for sparing your time, for making the talk so interesting. The questions were never ending. So thank you very much, Your Excellency. All I can say at present, because we are on a virtual mode, that I can salute you and I can put my hands together for an excellent talk. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, students. Thank you, faculty, for being here with us all through the talk. And I'm sure a lot of you have been watching on YouTube. The YouTube comments, I think Priya can put up to me, and I will see what all required to be forwarded to Your Excellency. I'll forward that. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Yes, thank you all.